On June 19th, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, announced the United States will withdraw from the UN Human Rights Council. Washington cited the alleged, quote, anti-Israel bias as one of the primary reasons for leaving the council. In a statement on Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had something to say about this. He thanked U.S. President Donald Trump and Haley for their, quote, courageous decision against the hypocrisy and the lies of the so-called UN Human Rights Council. For years, the UNHRC has proven to be a biased, hostile, anti-Israel organization that has betrayed its mission of protecting human rights. Now, U.S. Ambassador Haley, she also pointed to the memberships of China, Cuba, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Venezuela as their membership on the council as a reason for leaving the Human Rights Council. But members of the council that have been accused of widespread human rights abuses but were not listed by Haley as reasons for leaving include Saudi Arabia, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Pakistan. All of these countries are close U.S. allies. So why is the U.S. leaving the UN Human Rights Council? Well, a big part of it is that it is good press for the Trump administration. It's good for the Trump administration because it positions the U.S. in a way that appeals to his base. That is, it positions the United States as being against the kind of globalist international institutions, as being pro-America, putting America first, regaining our strength. And by pulling out of the Human Rights Council, it's a message to the base that we're living up to our America first message. But we know that the reasons cited, like the membership of China, Cuba, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Venezuela. China, Cuba, Venezuela, this is an easy kind of targeting of socialist countries, quote unquote socialist countries that it's very easy to pit against the Trump base. It appeals to the Trump base because it's a natural enemy of the capitalist West, of the capitalist United States, that we can position ourselves against these other people because this is a decades old dichotomy between the capitalist and socialist countries. So it's not very controversial to point to these countries. However, pointing to one of the biggest U.S. allies, such as Saudi Arabia, who has also been accused of violating human rights, that would be controversial for them. So that's why they didn't point to the U.S. allies in citing reasons for leaving the council, because we know that the U.S. doesn't have a problem with sitting down with human rights violators, because Trump just recently sat down with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. So that isn't really a reason. It's just a way to politicize the issue and to make it appeal to the Trump base. Now let's look into the alleged anti-Israel bias. Now, the Human Rights Council, in the wake of the protests in Gaza that began in March of this year, it voted to send a team of international war crimes investigators to look into the conflict. And the UN resolution was supported by 29 members of the Human Rights Council, 14 members abstained, and 2 members voted against it, those 2 members being the United States and Australia. The resolution stated that the investigators must, quote, investigate all alleged violations and abuses in the context of the military assaults on large-scale civilian protests that began on March 30th, 2018. Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, the UN human rights chief, backed this investigation and has heavily criticized the Israeli response to the Gazan protests as, quote, wholly disproportionate. Under international law, Israel is the occupying power of Gaza and the West Bank, and therefore it's obligated to protect the people of Gaza and their welfare. But as of late June, the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces numbered at least 135. Health officials have been consistently releasing the names and ages amongst those killed by Israeli forces, and they include men, women, and children. The number of Palestinians wounded by the Israeli forces is in the thousands, and a recent health official release mentions Mohammed Abed al-Baba, a photographer, He's a photographer for a news agency who was shot in the leg while wearing a press vest and helmet. There have been 0 Israelis killed in the conflict, and 1 Israeli soldier has been reported as being slightly wounded by shrapnel. Because of the ongoing conflict in the of Gaza, because of the ongoing occupation of Gaza and the West Bank by Israel, which is recognized by the UN and is rejected by Israel, and because of the conflicts that arise from that occupation, the UN Human Rights Council has committed to addressing those problems that arise in the occupied territories every session that it meets. So this is stated in what is known as Agenda Item 7, which makes space in the sessions to look into, quote, human rights situation in Palestine and other occupied Arab territories. This is an ongoing occupation that has been ongoing for decades and is illegal under international law. So the Human Rights Council makes room for this issue in every session. The other members that were cited by Haley for leaving the council, China, Cuba, they're not involved. Although they have human rights violations alleged against them, they're not involved in decades-long, illegal occupation of a territory and of a territory next to them. So Israel stands out as unique in this situation in that it is illegally occupying land. And that illegal occupation has been going on for decades. So the Human Rights Council makes a point of addressing this issue. So we can look at how the Human Rights Council addresses it, but we can also look at what Israelis say about the occupation of Gaza. So Israeli scholars Idit Zertal and Akiva Eldar, they described what actually happened in respect to the occupation of Gaza by Israel. They said, these Israeli scholars said, the ruined territory was not released, quote, for even a single day from Israelis' military grip or from the price of the occupation that the inhabitants pay every day. They also went on to say that after the disengagement, when Israel pulled back from Gaza in the late 2000s, they said that after that disengagement, quote, Israel left behind scorched earth, devastated services, and people with neither a present nor a future. The settlements were destroyed in an ungenerous move by an unenlightened occupier, which in fact continues to control the territory and kill and harass its inhabitants by means of formidable military might. So here we have the recognition by Israel of what's happening in Gaza, and in the wake of the march, the protests that began in March, we can see that the disproportionate amount of deaths that occurred, that Israel is not really living up to its obligations under international law, and that this illegal occupation is affecting innocent people in Gaza. In the wake of the pullout of the U.S. of the UN Human Rights Council, Palestinians have spoken out about this issue. So Taysir Khalid, he's a member of the executive committee of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. He told Al Monitor that the U.S. is launching a systematic attack on international institutions in order to provide political cover to Israel and ensure its impunity. He continued, quote, but this withdrawal may be useful for the Palestinian cause, as it will prompt neutral European countries such as Russia and France, which unlike the U.S. are not hostile to the Palestinian people, to play a bigger role in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So here we can see that some Palestinians are speaking out, saying that the withdrawal of the U.S. from the UN Human Rights Council may not be such a bad thing after all, because it won't get in the way of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how to achieve a peace between the two sides. So the main point is that this is a political move, and we'll have to remember that it's a political move by the Trump administration, and we'll have to remember that in the future. But we will keep an eye on this issue and what's in store for the UN Human Rights Council.